their thoughts. Seeing this man who had the best clothing, but now he has no clothing. A man who had the most privileged existence in Mecca, but now he doesn't even have a cloth to cover his body at death. And I'll tell you one thing. The same way that these people, the ones who were young in Mecca, growing up with Mus'ab ibn Umayr, and who also became Muslim, radiallahu anhum ajma'in, how they would envy him, how they would want to be like him when he was in Mecca. If only they could have the same kind of clothing and the same perfume and the same beautiful looks and handsomeness. If only they had the same wealthy parents. And here they are, and they're looking upon this man. How do you think they would have felt? Let's say it like this. When the Prophet ﷺ came along, and he sees the body of Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu ta'ala an, and he looks upon his body, and those companions are standing with him, and they know about Mus'ab ibn Umayr, and everyone knows his story. And the Prophet comes and he sees his body, and he said, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه. Amongst the mu'mineen, there are some rijal, there are men who are true to their word with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of them Allah has taken. They've been given the honor of martyrdom, of shahada fi sabilillah. And amongst them there are others who are still waiting for that privilege. And these people, وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا, these are not a people who go here and there. These are a people of thabat, these are a people of istiqamah, these are a people who they have not changed in anything. How they were, they were. They have not changed in anything. How they were, they still are. They were on Iman and Allah took them with Iman. The same way that the Sahaba before Islam used to envy this man for everything that he had, now he became the biggest source of envy. Because the Prophet ﷺ gave him a stamp of approval. Because the Prophet testified on his behalf. Because the Prophet singled this man out, radiallahu ta'ala, and said, this is a man, he was true to his word with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you think that the kind of gluttonous envy that people have when they see these celebrities and whatever could ever compare with this, to see how a man, he is successful in akhirah. He has been given the honor of martyrdom, and the Prophet has testified for him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In terms of the image or the life of celebrity, then of course we live in very envious times. We live in situations and times where people naturally envy and they want to be like others. In fact, if you think about the times of the Romans, when the Romans were in power in the Roman Empire, there was two ways to become close to the celebrity. The emperor. And the emperor, of course, was deified. People would consider the emperor to be God, or like Divi Filius, the son of a god, like Julius Caesar and Augustus. People would worship the emperor. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. They would worship the emperor. But there were two ways to show your loyalty and adulation to the emperor. Two ways for you to gain this transference of what they believe to be divine power. One is to be able to touch that emperor. And so when the emperor's walking past, they would stretch out their hands to try and get a touch of the emperor. And that for them, was a privilege. And the other thing was to own something that the emperor owned. If they could own something the emperor owned, again it was a privilege, it was a transference of what they believed to be divine power. And that's exactly the same thing we have with celebrities today. It's exactly the same thing. People have this fascination and zealous determination to try and get a touch of the celebrity. Because for them, if you can touch a celebrity, it's a transference of celebrity status, of celebrity power. It's like, I touched this individual, and you guys had no chance to touch him. That's how it is, right? I managed to touch him. Or is to own something the celebrity owns. Just a month ago, there was a big story in England concerning Ringo Starr, who was he was a drummer for the Beatles group, music, pop band in the 60s and 60s. And his house where he was born, and he lived there until he was 4 years old, people are up in arms and debating whether this house should ever be destroyed, or if it should remain as a cultural heritage for people to visit. And you think to yourself, Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Islam wa kafa biha ni'mah, that we praise Allah for the ni'mah of Islam. I mean, think about the mindset of these people. The individual left this house when he was 4 years old. He has no real recollection or memory of that house. But people are making placards and people are campaigning against the council and against all these things. How dare you destroy this individual's house? Because he lived there until he was 4 years old. And he was born in that house. Hugh Hefner was an individual in America who paid $85,000 to reserve the crypt, like the grave next to the grave of Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was a famous female actress, and this individual paid $85,000 just to be buried next to her. If you remember the assassination of the American president John F. Kennedy, the individual who apparently assassinated him was Lee Harvey Oswald, and he was killed by a person called Ruby something. When he was buried, Lee Harvey Oswald, the murderer, so-called murderer of John F. Kennedy, about more than a decade after that, there were a lot of calls of suspicion. Did he really die, actually? Was he really killed, or was it all a cover-up? And you had these conspiracy individuals who were coming out and saying so much. To set the record straight, the government decided to dig up his body and to do their medical testing, and then to set the record straight, and then they had to inter him in a different grave, but in a new coffin. In a different grave, but in a new coffin. Someone bought his old coffin for $70,000. For $70,000, someone bought his coffin. And this